So now we're going to continue exploring and look at function notation. So function notation is just a different way of saying to evaluate for a certain x value. So that's the first thing, is realizing function notation isn't really new math, it's just a different way of writing it. And then we're also going to look at graphing linear and constant functions. So the first thing is to use function notation. So we say that y equals f of x. Anything that is plugged into this parentheses means that that's the x value. Anything that's plugged in here for y means that's the y value. So when we're using function notation, we replace y and we say f of x equals 3x minus 5 instead of writing y equals 3x minus 5. F of x is just another name for y. So it's like a synonym in the English language. It's like saying small versus tiny. There are times when you might want to say, if you go through McDonald's, you're going to say, I want a small drink. You're not going to say, I want a tiny drink. So just like synonyms have context, we're also looking at context for function notation. So if I have f of x equals 6x minus 2, find the value of the function for each value of x. So x equals -3 means to replace x with -3. And the way I would show that in function notation is I would say f of x equals 6x minus 2, and I would show that I'm replacing x with -3. That's all this means. And then I would calculate that using Web 2.0, and I get -20. So what we can say then is that the f of -3 equals -20, which would also mean that I have the point -3, 20 as an ordered pair. Again, context. If I'm graphing, I might want to use the point -3, -20. If I'm looking at an equation, I'm probably going to want to use the f of -3 equals -20. Let's look at this next example. I'm going to write it in function notation, and I'm going to get f of 0 equals -2. Again, that is the ordered pair, 0, -2, and depending on the context, it might be helpful to write it one way or another. Now, I'm giving you directly in that function notation. I want to know what is f of -3. That means replace x with -3. When you replace it, you want to use parentheses, and this is really helpful with Web 2.0 because I'm squaring the -3 here. So when I square this, it's going to become +9, but I have that negative hanging out front. If you type this entire statement into Web 2.0, it's going to give you -15, as long as you use parentheses around the value you're replacing x with. If you do not do that, you're going to wind up in trouble. So now here, they want me to replace x with t. Well, that's easy. I'm just going to replace x with t, and I get the same thing with t's instead of x's. Here, I want to find g of t plus 2. That means I'm going to take x and I'm going to replace it with t plus 2. And I'm going to, again, do that in parentheses so that I can distribute the 5. And then I'm going to simplify plus 10 minus 1 to get my final answer. So it's really just a matter of replacing x and using parentheses to ensure you get the right answer. Now they're giving me a point and coordinate form, and they want me to find f of 2. So that means, what is the y value when x is 2? Well, in the first one, the y value is going to be 6, because that's where the f of 2, that's where my x value is 2. So this one, f of x equals -x squared. If I want to know the f of 2, I'm going to replace x with 2, and Web 2.0 is going to give me -4. So in a set of ordered pairs, you're just looking for where is the x value 2, and then what is the y value. And then in a function, in an equation, you're replacing that x with 2. So that's two different ways you can look at it. If I'm on a graph and I want to find f of 2, that means find where x is 2. So on this graph, I'm going to find where x is 2, and it looks like it's roughly y equals 1. So it would be the f of 2 is 1, because all it's asking you is, what is the y value when the x value is 2, because 2 is in the parentheses. Here, I want to know where is f -2. So I'm going to go over to -2 on the x-axis, and I am somewhere in the ballpark of 3 when I'm at -2. So I'm doing a little bit of estimating here because it might be 2.8, but we're not worried about that. We're just looking at what is it estimating close to. Now, if I want to know for what value is f of x equal to 0, that's not where x is 0, that's where y is 0. So if I want to know where my y value is 0, I go to the axis, and then I'm going to go across until I find it at 4. So the f of 0 equals 4, or this actually is wrong, so I found a mistake. This should be the f of 4 equals 0, because my y value is 0. So this is actually incorrect notation from the publisher. Good job, we found a mistake. So if I'm looking at writing an equation using function notation, I have to solve it for y, and then I replace the y with f of x. So write the equation using the function notation f of x, and then find f of 1 and f of a. So I'm just going to solve this for y. I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides, and then I'm going to divide by -4. Now it wants me to use that function notation, so I'm just going to replace it with f of x equals, and if you want to write it over one fraction, you can. You do not have to. Then it wants me to find the f of 1, which means replace x with 1, and make sure to do that in parentheses. I'm going to type all of that directly into Web 2.0, and I'm going to get -1/2. If I want to find the f of a, I'm going to replace x with a, and I'm going to do it in parentheses, and I'm going to simplify it, and there's f of a. Now if I want to graph linear and constant functions, a function is defined as f of x instead of y. So instead of y equals, I'm saying f of x equals, and that means, hey, this is a function. So it's just kind of a flag that's put up to say, hey, we have a function right here. So if I want to graph f of x equals -1.5, that's going to be a horizontal line at -1.5, the same as y equals -1.5 would be a horizontal line. The domain means I'm going to move from left to right. So the graph exists everywhere left to right. So it's going to be -infinity to infinity. And the range is bottom to top. The only place it exists is right here at -1.5. So that's why my range is just that one, -1.5.